Chapter 12. Jay gritted his teeth, took in a slow, deep breath, and then released it all at once. The explosive outpouring of air helping to calm him down. He loosened his death grip on their suitcases and sighed. I understand. I'm still sorry that it happened, but I understand what you're saying. Now, if you are sure that you found everything that spilled out of your purse, we should probably be going. We need to grab a taxi and get to the B&B as quickly as possible. Once we are there, I want you to take a warm bath and make sure your muscles are nice and loose. Your side is going to hurt enough as it is tomorrow, even if you do take care of it. Lexie smiled at his concern. I know, taking care of myself will help me to feel better tomorrow and heal quicker. You forget that I have had plenty of bruises over the years thanks to my own martial arts training. She gave him a quick hug, wincing at the sudden strain on her side. He had forgotten, not that she was capable or trained. He knew that they had been sparring during practice every day lately. No, what he had forgotten were the inevitable bruises and sore muscles that she would have undoubtedly had. Knowing how to take care of your own body was one of the first things you learned when doing any martial arts. Being bruised and battered with sore muscles, or worse, was par for the course for anyone serious about learning self-defense. People who didn't quickly learn to properly care for their bodies never lasted long. More severe injuries always followed because they didn't know how to care for themselves enough to prevent it. Even something as simple as a warm-up or stretching was still a foreign concept to a lot of people. He laughed and shook his head. You are right, I didn't think. Let me know if there is anything I can help you with when we get there. He apologized for the simple mistake. It's fine. It isn't like you meant any harm. You were just trying to help and forgot. Together they scanned the now empty platform one last time to check for anything lying on the ground that she may have forgotten. I don't see anything on the ground that I might have missed. Letting go of him, she led them outside to find a taxi. Unfortunately, the taxi driver didn't speak any English. They had come prepared for such an occasion. So instead of trying to mangle their way through the French language, they held up a finger to indicate that they needed a moment, and quickly pulled out the contents of Lexie's suitcase. Finding the cue cards that they had made before they left, flipping through them, they found the one they were looking for. Once again, they opted for the straightforward route and just handed him the card, instead of trying to make sense of what they had written. They were not familiar enough with the French language to not twist it around and insult the driver in some way. The likelihood of them making a mistake of that nature was incredibly slim. They had, after all, written down everything exactly how it needed to be said, along with the correct pronunciation. Suddenly, though, when their own language skills failed them, they found themselves incredibly shy and embarrassed. They had no confidence in their language skills, it had never been something that they studied. There had never been a reason, or in the case of how they had been schooled, an opportunity. Both knew that they wanted to travel one day, but like so many things in life, it was a far-off goal that never seemed like something that would actually happen. As is the case with such things, preparing for such an unlikely goal was never a priority. They were regretting their lack of foresight now that it was too late. The driver nodded at them, said something in French, and handed the card back to them. Facing forward, he put the car in gear and pulled away from the train station. Maybe when we get to the B&B, we can ask the hostess if she can give us some pointers for studying the language, Lexie speculated quietly, embarrassment coating her voice. I hope so. Not even being able to ask for help is not only a problem, it's also incredibly embarrassing. I don't want us to be like one of those normal tourists that you always hear about, who are unwilling to ever learn or speak the local language. Making the effort to learn the language when you visit a foreign county should be a given. Whether or not we will be any good at the language is something else entirely. Jay responded in kind. Neither of us knows if we have any talent for picking up foreign languages, so this will be a learning experience for us both. I agree though, now that we are here, we need to make an effort to learn as much as we can. There will never be a better opportunity for us to learn and practice than when we are in the country of its origin. If only they had had more time when they had been preparing. There was so much that they had not had time to do. Studying the French language any more than they needed to write the cue cards had been impossible. If only there had been more time for us to prepare for this trip, we could have actually taken the time to study the basics of the language, at least, Jay responded, voicing her inner thoughts aloud. Hopefully, we'll have time enough to somewhat remedy that mistake while we are here. Their oddly awkward conversation over for the moment, the view outside the taxi gave them their first clear view of Versailles. It was as they were driving through the city that Jay began speaking. I think we went too far on the train before. It would have been faster for us to get off at the Versailles Chantiers station. Oh well, at least we didn't end up going all the way to the stop for the palace. Jay was speaking aloud to himself, not expecting a reply. He was surprised when Lexie started talking in turn. It's fine either way. We'll get there when we get there. This way we have the chance to at least see more of Versailles. Relax, Jay, enjoy the time that we have here. This is new for both of us, but we're not going to be able to enjoy it if we are tense and worrying constantly. Lexie told him as she turned away from the window to face him. Jay's answering sigh drew her attention to his face. I know. It's just that for whatever reason, I'm just having a hard time relaxing right now. A good night's sleep and making sure that you feel all right in the morning will do me a world of good. It was Lexie's turn to sigh in exasperation. I already told you that I would be fine. Seriously, stop worrying about it. It's already happened, and there is nothing that we can do about it now. I'm not going to break just because of a bruise. It happens, get over it. She was starting to feel angry at the way he was acting. I know, calm down. Jay tried to calm her down, holding both hands out in front of himself as a barrier and placating gesture. I know that you aren't going to break because of a mere bruise. That's not why I'm acting like this. He stopped talking. Then why are you acting so weird? Ever since we got off the train and I was pushed to the ground, you've seemed off. Lexie pushed him to continue. It's because I don't want to see you hurt. Not because I don't think that you can handle yourself. When I lost my hold on you at the station, I panicked more than I ever have before. I was able to ignore it for a little bit when I found you. After that though, it all just came rushing back to me. It was such a simple thing that was over so quickly, but it gave me a glimpse as to how I would react if it ever happened again. What I saw wasn't anything I liked. The mere thought of it happening again makes me break out in a sweat even now. It's something I'm going to have to deal with. I'm sorry if I was acting like a jerk afterward. He struggled to explain how he was acting. He didn't want to explore the reason why it had panicked him to such a degree. Not yet, in any case. That was a matter for later, hopefully much later when they had more answers than they did now. Lexie folded her arms over her chest and stared at Jay intently. Do you honestly think that you are the only one who was panicking or freaked out because it could happen again? I hate to break it to you, but you're not. I'm worried about it as well, just like I'm also worried about something happening to you. Her fists tightened, and her arms shifted until she was now hugging her chest tightly instead of being folded defensively. We are in a country that we are unfamiliar with, and where anything can happen. Stepping outside of our room here might be dangerous. She was exaggerating and being slightly sardonic, but hoped the point would come across regardless. We can't. No, I can't have you freaking out every time something happens to us here. I'm depending on you, just like you are depending on me. Get out of your head and focus on what we can control instead of what we can't. Jay huffed lightly at her words. Having it spelled out for him like that was infuriating. She was right, of course she was. He was angry at himself for needing it to be pointed out to him, and he was even angrier that there was nothing he could do about it. He needed to get himself under control. The problem was, he had not felt in control since she had stepped into his life again. Having her here was only throwing him more off balance. I'll try. I know that you are right. I do need to get myself under control. I'm in no condition to be watching anyone's back right now, let alone yours." She laughed at his admission, lightening the mood between them instantly. "I think that is enough heavy discussion for the back of this taxi, don't you?" "Yes, I do. There can't be that much left before we get there anyway. Let's just sit back and relax for however long there is left." He nudged her gently, encouraging her to ease the stranglehold she had on herself and relax as well. Lexie's hands whitened briefly before slowly relaxing. She opened and closed, then opened and closed them once more, letting the blood rush back in and start circulating normally in her hand again. A moment later, she opened her arms and released the hold she had on herself. Pushing herself back in the seat, she cracked her neck and exhaled before smiling slightly at him. "Just be normal with me, okay? Nothing has changed between us. We were friends before, and we are friends now. We are simply experiencing some growing pains as all. We have been apart for so long that we are still reacquainting ourselves with one another. Honestly, I think this would have been easier if we hadn't known one another growing up," Lexie told him, trying to explain her inner thoughts. "I know what you mean. It's like, there is this history between us that can't be ignored at the same time though we are having to start over. It's muddling everything up and causing us to be confused in ways that we wouldn't be with someone entirely new," Jay replied, understanding what she was trying to say. "Yes, that is exactly it. Our shared history is making it hard for us to get past our old perceptions and ideas about each other. I know the you now, and the you from back then are different people. I even consider the you now that I have gotten to know to be my friend." Jay didn't think that there was a need for him to tell her that he actually thought of her as his best friend. He was afraid that said a lot more about himself than he wanted anyone to know. "I say that, but everything you do, I am still seeing through the eyes of my younger self. It's getting better, mind you, but I don't think that there is anything that we can do to hurry it along. Time alone will do that for us." Jay finished his spiel and raised his downcast eyes to hers. "Time, huh? If that is what it takes, then that is what it takes. We have the entirety of this trip to fix that, and hopefully afterward as well." Lexie smiled at him as the taxi turned into a long driveway, and they could finally see where they would be staying during their time in France. They climbed out of the taxi and stared at the giant house in front of them. "It's gorgeous," Lexie whispered. The words were barely loud enough for him to hear, even though he was standing right next to her. "It is, isn't it?" he whispered back in the same low voice. This moment was for them. No one else needed to hear their soft words of adoration. The thumping of their luggage behind them brought them back to reality as the taxi driver set their belongings down for them. He smiled at them as they paid him, and then with a wave and a wink he drove off. Their hands clasped together and their luggage firmly in hand, they knocked on the front door and waited. Then they waited some more before knocking again and waiting. Finally, when no one came, they opened the door and peered inside, unsure what to expect. A lone lady, possibly in her late 30s, dressed in jeans and a long-sleeve shirt that had an indistinguishable logo with faded words on it, was coming down the stairs in front of them, and saw their heads peeking through the barely open door. "Are you the two Americans that will be staying with us?" she asked them in barely accented English. They opened the door farther, but did not enter. "We are. This is Lexie, and I'm Jay Refton. I believe the reservation was made under my name." It was indeed. "I have the listing right here." She smiled at them both warmly before noticing that neither had entered the house yet. "Oh, I apologize, please do come in. Is this the first time you have stayed in a bed and breakfast before?" "This is our first time really doing any kind of trip away from home," Jay answered for them both as he let go of Lexie's hand and opened the door wider for her to step through. "I thought as much when I saw you just standing there instead of coming inside. You have to understand that during normal business hours, we operate just like any other business. In other words, we have an open door policy, so I apologize if you were waiting for someone at the door." She smiled at them both as they blushed in embarrassment at their own ignorance. Now, unfortunately, we do have a problem. She continued. Your reservation was originally for 2 rooms, and that normally would not have been an issue. It seems, however, that one of our guests that were scheduled to leave has instead decided to stay for a while longer. I apologize, but I only have 1 room available at this time. It is yours if you want it, for a discounted rate, of course. She finished, looking more than a little embarrassed herself. Ah. Jay cocked an eyebrow at Lexie, unsure of how to respond. Just 1 will be fine. If it's all you have, then there is nothing to be done about it. We will take you up on the discounted rate, though. Lexie finished with a smile, letting the hostess know that everything was all right. She smiled back, pleased that we were not mad or going to cause a ruckus over something so small. That is perfectly all right, I did offer it after all. Besides the 2 of you, being pleasant about this mess is a nice breath of fresh air for most people. They smiled at her and chuckled as she signed them in and grabbed the key to their room. It truly wasn't a big deal to them, or at least it wasn't to Jay, and since Lexie had been the one to agree with her, he could only assume that she felt the same. They followed her up the stairs, carefully carrying their luggage so that it didn't get damaged on the steps. She led them to a door and handed them the key. Breakfast is served at 8 sharp, dinner is served at 5 in the afternoon. The bathroom is just down the hall, the last door on the right. Once more she gave them a grateful smile. If there is anything you need, please let me know. She took a step back, tilted her head at the both of them, and turned back towards the stairs. Actually, there is one thing. Jay burst out quickly before she could take more than a few steps. There is. Lexie looked at him questioningly. Yes, there is. Jay smiled at her before turning back to their hostess. We were hoping to pick up a little of the French language while we are here. Would you have the time to help us, or would you perhaps be able to point us to someone who would be willing to? Her smile grew even larger, and a warmth that Jay hadn't even noticed was missing before crept into her eyes. You have no idea how happy I am to hear you ask that. There are far too many people that come here from all over the world that expect us to speak their language, but are unwilling to learn our own. For that alone, I would be delighted to help you whenever you have time. Come and find me. If you do not mind me working while we talk, then any time is fine. She turned to go once more and then stopped, turning to face them. My name is Sophie. Leaving them with her name in parting, she left them alone, standing outside their rented room. Lexie nudged Jay in the side and smirked. That was a good call asking her. I'd actually forgotten, and she seemed really happy that we wanted to try and learn the language.